Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Clark. And this is the Conservative Five, an online TV news production of Liberty Nation News. Kamala Harris has no real platform to speak of besides abortion rights. Economy under her watch is in the commode. The border is wide open, inflation is high, and wages stagnant. USA is a hot mess. Ms. Harris revealed a couple of presidential policy points recently, and I think we have heard this all before. It has often been said that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. If that's the case, former President Donald Trump ought to feel quite flattered. James Fight, Liberty Nation News, penned a great article this week pointing out all the eerily similar promises made by Harris. Jim is not here, but Graham Noble is and can run wild on this topic. You are up, Mr. Noble.
Thanks, Sarah. I think if you had a scenario, if this was possible, if you could go out onto the street and you could scoop up perhaps 25 random people who you identified, you found out beforehand that they all identified themselves as Democrat voters, and you grab like 25 of them, but they're people who are not really, they're not immersed in politics. They're just living their lives, but they happen to be Democrat voters. You could take them to sit them down in a room, and then you could reel off a bunch of Trump policies to them. Now, we're assuming here that they don't know where these policies come from. You could reel off those policies and say, so what do you think of those? You think those are good ideas, bad ideas? I'm willing to bet that out of that random 25 Democrat voters, probably anywhere between 15 and 20 of them would nod their heads to every one of those policies and say, that sounds like a great idea. Of course, then they'd be horrified once you told them they were Trump's policies. But you see, the point of this is that Democrats, generally speaking, do not vote for policies. They vote for personalities, and they vote for emotion, and they vote according to what sound bites they've heard. The policies themselves are less important. So in a way, it's kind of easy for Kamala Harris or for any other Democrat, for that matter, to come out with policy positions that normally you'd think only a Republican would come up with, and Democrats would be horrified at the idea of these positions. But most Democrat voters, apart from the hardcore committed progressives, most Democrat voters are not voting primarily for the policies. And so it's actually easy for Kamala Harris to come out and say, oh, I'm going to secure the border. And okay, it's a joke because we all know it was her job to secure the border. Starting from the beginning of 2021, that was her job. She was named the border czar. I don't know if Biden himself ever called her the border czar, but certainly the left-leaning media frequently used that term, border czar, when they were talking about Kamala Harris. And of course, Axios recently made fools of themselves when they came out and said she was never the border czar. And then somebody pointed out that they themselves had described her as the border czar. But
maybe they put her in charge of the border because she'd fail, and that's what they want.
Well, perhaps, but that's a good observation, Sarah. That is actually quite interesting. Yeah. But anyway, so now she does that, and then of course she comes out the other day with this thing about, well, we're going to end tax on tips for service industry workers. Well, Kamala Harris was the one whose vote in 2022 broke the tie in the Senate to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, and within that act was a whole section about giving the IRS more power to go after service industry workers to make sure that they were being taxed on their tips. And for her now to come around and say that, pretend that that's her idea, no tax on tips, is outrageous. I mean, Trump said it months ago. And of course, they're even now saying, even Karine Jean-Pierre, White House spokesperson, just the other day said, oh, Joe Biden would sign a bill to end tax on tips. Well, I mean, they're literally, I mean, you always think with politicians, okay, they're just saying what they want, what they think they want, what they think people want to hear in order to get elected. But the Democrats have taken that whole idea to a whole new level now. And, considering that Kamala Harris back in 2020, when she was still running in the primaries, in the Democrat primaries for the president, she actually said that if she became president on day one, she would close the illegal alien detention centers. And so for her now to pretend that she's going to secure the border and she's going to lower taxes and she's going to end taxation on tips, it's just blatantly saying things that she has no intention whatsoever of doing. But she thinks, well, these are, people like these ideas. Most of the American people like all of those ideas. So I'll just come out and say that they were my ideas. And it's just crazy. I mean, Biden's been accused of plagiarism on a few occasions, and she's kind of taken plagiarism to a whole new level.
I'm surprised that the press bought into that after they claimed they were such hoodwinked over Biden being clearly cognitively and physically in a major decline. And yet they said, oh, we were surprised. They lied to us. We don't like them. We don't like Joe Biden. Is the press surprised that Kamala Harris is now saying she wants to do the same things Trump is doing, or are they covering for her and saying she's making up these great policies, Dave?
Surprised isn't the word I'd use. I think that the word is delighted. The mainstream fawning press is delighted to have the opportunity to employ its creative fiction skills. They're attempting to take a duo with extremely harmful and intellectually entrenched social justice ideas and then they want to paint them as moderates. Make no mistake, Harris and Walz are not moderates. They are radical progressives who want to remake America in their perverse image of reality. Harris now says she isn't for universal health care, a key element, though, of her 2019 failed presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. She was an advocate for defunding police departments, the only bulwark that we citizens have between us and anarchy. Now she's not. Harris can try to distance herself from the Biden-Harris open borders debacle, the Afghanistan retreat disaster, and the economic wasteland they've created for the poor and the middle class, but she can't. Sarah, you can buy a white horse, paint stripes on it, but it doesn't become a zebra.
I'll make it a zebra, darn it. I've always wanted a zebra. Okay. I'm gonna pick up on something Graham said. Clark, I never call you by your first name. I don't know why that is, but I like your tie today. Anyway, do the voters on the left care about policy, or do they just want to have their feelings, hugged and comforted?
Short answer, no. They don't care about policy, and it's provable. And you can call me by my last name. I call you Cowgirl. This is another one of my 50-cent tag sale ties.
That is not my last name, however.
I know.
Go ahead.
My affectionate moniker for you as a fellow agrarian.
Yes.
No, they don't care about policy. And actually, I think we really need to get our brains. We have rational brains, hopefully. And so we don't understand what they're doing sometimes. And it comes back to this idea of an ideology eclipsing rational policy. And ultimately, I'll begin where I end. This social justice ideology does not coexist with rational policy. Even within its own belief system, there are tensions that are irreconcilable. For instance, intersectionality. As we see the left now fight about whether the transgender is above the black, is above the woman, is above the person who has all three. This is nothing but endless conflict, and so too with the policies. And in the end, they have conflicts in their policies. They can't handle anything other than a one-party monolith. And so queer theory, critical race theory, gender theory has come out and dominated this. These are theories that, by the way, all fall on their faces, completely irrational, completely feely, touchy-feely, as you say. and they don't yield anything but harm to the very people that they pretend to help. Now, if you're a Black person and you take exception to these policies, you will be immediately attacked, okay? You're no longer the Black person they're defending. You're the Black person that dares go against the party mantra. If
You
you're
ain't Black.
woman, pardon?
You ain't Black.
You ain't Black. And if you're, that's right, you literally are not Black. And if you are a young girl who says, well, I was duped into having my breasts removed and all these surgeries, they will attack you because you're going against the ideology. Are we talking about policies now? Are we talking about whether transgender surgeries are scientifically better or worse? No, we're talking about an ideology. And as long as this ideology tries to wrangle with policies, you will always see horrible policies presented by people who are DEI as if they are good. So bad policy gets packaged in the identity world and suddenly it becomes good. Good policy is not even something that is identifiable. The numerous tensions within this chaos that we see is a translation, I believe, of policy from an ideology that itself is so false, dysfunctional, hateful, and toxic that it can never translate into anything else but chaos, toxicity, and destruction. Because that's really what it's about, is destroying everything from the family to the border to the currency so they can recreate this new thing. They've never told us what it is. Look around. We see what it is. It's terrible. So yeah, they don't really care about policy. And they don't want to hear that electric cars may hurt the environment because they already believe that they save the environment. This is massive cognitive dissonance. This is a cult. This is a cult in chaos. That's what I think we see.
Okay. And now you've painted a horrible picture for 100 years from now where we're all eunuchs. Thank you. Anyway, Andrew, let's say so Kamala is serious about all this. Could her policies actually, the ones she's promising, result in change for the better? Or is she just talking blowing smoke? You know where?
Well, if you're talking about no taxes on tips, absolutely, that would benefit millions of workers. That's fantastic. On the other hand, at a time when the government's running a $1.5 trillion deficit and will run a $2 trillion deficit in a few years and a $35 trillion national debt, and no one is cutting any spending, it's going to be quite difficult to make up for the revenue. Everything that Graham said, I was saying the exact same thing. So I'm going to go off the cuff here. On policy-wise, you guys make a good point. But Liberty Nation News reported on a recent CNBC study, and it showed that many voters have no clue what the policies are of either candidates. At the same time, many Democrat voters say that it would make their policy that would make no difference on the economy or their personal finances. So maybe they're just, because they don't know policy, they just admit defeat and say, you know what, no matter what they do, it's not going to matter. But other policies that we've seen over the last few years obviously is not helping the American people whatsoever. Real wage growth, inflation adjusted, of course, is negative. Median weekly earnings are negative. Inflation is eating everyone's lunch. Minorities' wages are down. So the policies presented by the current administration, have not worked. And despite Kamala Harris's acting like she's never been in office, the media are buying that lock, stock, and barrel. You saw a recent CBS News coverage of the Trump and Harris proposals of the no taxes on tip. And it's just, the divergence is remarkable. Here's what they said about Trump presenting the no tax tip. Quote, former President Donald Trump's vow to stop taxing tips would cost the federal government up to $250 billion over 10 years, according to a nonpartisan watchdog group. Now, here's a same network's coverage of Harris's scheme. Quote, Vice President Kamala Harris is rolling out a new policy position, saying she'll fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. That's just astounding. The exact same policy. And that's what CBS News presents to people on X. It's remarkable. Now, just the economics alone, it's not costing government anything. It's the people's money, not the government's money. So I can't stand when you talk about tax cuts and then you have these people saying, oh, it's going to cost the government. The government, they confiscate your wealth. It's not your wealth. And I'll say one more thing about the press and Kamala Harris. Axios, they did a recent excellent reporting on how the Kamala Harris campaign, they're manipulating headlines in the Google search ads. And that was quite interesting. That's quite the scoop.
Mhm.
But then Axios reporter, because she received such pushback on X from left-leaning voters, she said, "Oh, it's not much of a big deal. It's okay. It's just politics." It's just the way the media is covering everything from Kamala Harris copying Trump to just campaign tactic. It's befuddling and it's quite frustrating when you as Graham said, when you're immersed in this day after day.
Well, it's not good manners to steal the playbook from the other side. But can they run the plays? Liberty Nation News will report back on the status of the big game. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.